Hi. Welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Manitoba-based progressive thrash band Propaganda. In each episode, Greg and Steve, and formerly Keith, and still sometimes Keith, and a myriad of other guests go through line by line, note by note, every song by Winnipeg's finest export. Greg has been putting in some serious time, some would say too much time, on Unscripted Moments lately. So this week, unfortunately for everyone who loves Unscripted Moments, you get the B team. My name is Josh Lindley, and with my pal Dan Forcier, I used to host Last Believer, a podcast about Santa Cruz, California hardcore punk band Good Riddance. I've been on this show before. Dan, say hi to Unscripted Moments.
Yo, what's up, beautiful peoples?
So, I've been on 2 episodes classic. That's a throwback for all the Last Believer lovers out there. So, yeah.
So not booze.
I've been on 2 episodes of Unscripted Moments before. I was on the Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things When Fucked Up Things Become Ordinary episode. I was also on the Letters to a Young Anus episode. If you want my background and why I have been invited to be on this show, you can check out those episodes. This episode is going to be about Rio De San Atlanta, Manitoba, which is the 5th song in on side 1 of Less Talk, More Rock. Dan has never been on this show before.
No.
This is uncharted pod territory. Dan, tell us about yourself.
Oh, about myself.
About yourself. We'll talk about Propaganda for the next hour or so. But
no, I know that
why would you be on this show?
That really threw me for a loop because I was just getting ready to talk about Propaganda. That's a great question as to why I'd be on the show. Basically, kind of as you mentioned, we both had the Good Riddance podcast, Last Believer. Greg was on at least twice.
At least
3 times?
Maybe 3, maybe 4.
But he definitely on our final episode. He was part of our final episode. Yeah, and then you and I being big Propaganda fans, you've been on the show, as you mentioned. And yeah, you made a joke about an episode takeover, and here we are. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
but
okay.
But yeah, you've been involved in and interested in punk and hardcore for 1,000 years, yeah?
Just about, yeah, far too long. I was actually thinking about that like recently, and it's definitely been way more than half my life. 25, 26 years at this point.
Mm-hmm. And given that you're only 28, that's impressive.
Yes. Just came out swinging right out of the womb, just picking up change, stage dives, and high fives.
Perfect. So what was your entry point for Propaganda? When did you first hear about the band? When did they first make an impression on you?
So coincidentally, it's not too dissimilar to my Good Riddance intro. So some people may have heard this before, but I'll try and paint a picture. All right. So the year was 1996. I'm like 12 or 13 at this point, which, I mean, I know our math doesn't really sync up now from what you just said, but let's go with it. And it was a long time ago, but if memory serves, it was like full-blown summer. And so then maybe I'm like freshly 13. But anyways, I'm hanging out with my friend Charles, and he had like a big family, and they had a big yard, and they had like a trampoline. So we're hanging out one day, just doing flips and stuff, and there's a boombox. We were listening to the Fugees. I remember that because I remember the skits from that record, and they've always been stuck in my head. But that was his older sister's CD that was left in the boombox. And I clearly remember that he ran and grabbed a CD from the aforementioned older sister, and he showed me the disc, and there's a crude drawing on the disc. And he's like, look what it says. It's me. It's Chuck. So that was the first time I listened to Survival of the Fattest.
Very good.
And then my brain explodes. And I went and had to get a copy as soon as possible. Yeah, then that's it. Just hearing Nation States, I was like, holy, okay. This is a whole new ball game.
And that is what started you on this Propaganda journey. Since then, have you ever seen the band live?
Yeah. And I know that I mentioned on our pod, right, when we covered Mother Superior and everything. Wait, that's what's on there. I like my older cousin who kind of got me into punk, right? He gave me a tape that had like NoFX's White Trash Jeeves and Being on one side and Gob's Too Late No Friends on the other. But then when I told him that I had heard this Nation States, he showed me how to clean everything. That's a very weird sentence, actually. Now that I think of it, as it comes out of my head. But yeah, so he showed me how to clean everything, and being really into nation states, he showed me like that back catalog. And what do you assume is the first song that you show a 13-year-old dude in the 90s to
Well,
get them pumped?
it was definitely Ska Sucks.
No,
Oh wow,
surprisingly,
okay,
no.
way off.
Yeah. No, it's got to be stick the fucking flag up your goddamn ass, you son of a bitch.
Oh yeah, of
Clearly.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, and then I just got really into How to Clean Everything and Let's Talk. Those are like my go-to records
So
in high school.
because you went from nation states to How to Clean Everything, even at that time, and I mean, we're talking you were 13, 14 years old, did you notice much of a difference between the production or the songwriting or anything between nation states and How to Clean Everything, or did that even register with you at the time?
I don't know if it registered with me necessarily at that time. I was like, oh, these are the same band, cool, two records. But shortly thereafter, you really hear um, the progression in not only the production, the songwriting, the artwork. You know what I mean? Like opening my eyes just to like kind of politics in general. Like if you're looking at Let's Talk, the gay positive, pro-feminist, anti-fascist, and like that's not something I was hearing a lot in white bread Quebec growing up, and it really like kind of grabbed the attention as to not just being teal blue with yellow. It just really packed more of a statement on it, and I like it showed like a maturity right away from one record to the other.
We'll talk a little more about the album specifically, but you said Less Talk and How to Clean Everything are sort of your propaganda records. Would you say that's the case now?
No. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. They're the ones that I will revisit, and I think nostalgia being a hell of a drug is really what I will revisit them, put them on all the time. But, and you and I have talked about this before, there's no other band that has matured and progressed with our musical tastes. Like
Mhm.
they just got heavier and more fuck you. Wait, let's scratch that part. They just got like a whole lot, just heavier, fuller, and just more of a thrash band than a skate punk band as we got older.
Like a cerebral fuck you, as opposed to the first album, which was, I don't know how many times did they say fuck you on that album.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, that's a nice way to put it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, before we get into analysis of this song for this week, we're going to hear a cover. This is a friend of the pod. His name is Lewis. He convinced a parent or a guardian to help him record this cover, and hopefully he's not embarrassed by it in the next 5 years or so.
Our city seems to function quite the same. Sweeping ghettos under one big roof makes them easy to contain. So the upper middle class can sleep. Convince themselves that trickle down will solve this poverty. Murderers block our streets. The weapons are their business policies. PR campaigns fed by the spoils of war. Against the relationship with populations of the poor. The system cannot be reformed.
All right, so that was Lewis and his version of Rio De San Atlanta, Manitoba. I want to say the passion in those vocals. Just
Hell
shocking.
yeah, dude. Hell yeah.
Dan, you've heard this. What did you think?
That was great. That was great. I wish I could do that when I was a kid.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're
Yeah.
assuming he's a kid. Who knows?
Well,
I mean,
I'm assuming they're
guessing.
not they're not
Yes.
old like me.
Yeah. You remember the first few what was that band? Blood Brothers? Remember that? Those kids, they had like baby vocals, right?
Yeah, I think I have some of those 7 inches kicking around. I
Yeah,
definitely
of
have at
course.
least one of them. Yeah.
All right. So Rio de San Atlanta, Manitoba from 1996 is Less Talk, More Rock, the fifth song on side one. For starters, Dan, we sort of hit on it already. How do you feel? You said that you very much love Less Talk, More Rock, and maybe
Yes.
that's nostalgia. But how do you feel about the placement of this song on the album? And Less Talk, More Rock in general, but the placement specifically of where this song fits and how it sounds in the chorus of the album.
Very good question. I find it really interesting because it comes right after Anchorless, which used to be my favorite propaganda song.
And now it's your favorite
Yeah.
Week of Then song?
I had a very emotional hardcore moment, and that soft song really resonated with me.
Mhm.
So it comes right after that, right? It just punches you in the face, and then into the public service announcement, or the unpublic service announcement. Yeah, I think it surprisingly fits really well, even like when juxtaposed. Those three tracks are so different from one another, yet it seems to flow so naturally, and then into nation states.
Mhm.
But yeah. No, I think it's the perfect spot for that quick little, what, like 53-second song.
Yeah. The timestamp I think changes depending on the pressing of the LP or the CD player you were using or whatever streaming service you're using.
Right.
I was thinking it would be funny today if we can get a 45-minute podcast out of this song, we will have made it 60 times longer than the actual song. I think that having the Reaganist Propagandy song on either of the full lengths that had come out at this point, immediately following the catchiest, poppiest song on either of the first two full
Yeah.
lengths, like that's it's a choice. In general, I love Less Talk. It is kind of an unbalanced record though, from front to back, and you can definitely tell maybe Jon's songs and Chris's songs don't blend together or flow together as well usually as Chris and Todd's songs do on later albums. But yeah, John K. Samson's contribution, especially his vocal performance in the songs that are more Chris centered, they're kind of incredible. Obviously, like I'm a big fan of Todd's gruff vocals, but also, especially in later albums, he's managed to, he sings more. But the harmonies, honestly, between Chris and Jon are just kind of like they're unmatched. Anything that came after, as far as trying to involve harmony, as much as Propaganda was trying to involve harmony, anything after Jon left the band, there's no reason to really compare so much as, there's no reason for them to compete, but to compare, I think, is a fair thing to do. Not that any of that matters in Rio De San Atlanta. This song. This song's not too out of the ordinary when you dig back into the comp tracks and the live recordings. All of Propaganda's history, like Mutual Friend comes to mind. There's a few songs that, from the Quantity is Job 1 CD that sort of give you the impression that, like, even before Todd was in the band, the influence of Infest or Drop Dead was already part of the band's DNA.
For sure.
Do you want to talk about specific instruments?
Specific instruments.
Yeah,
so,
what do you think of the guitar?
Fun part is me not being a musician. Sounds like a guitar. No, I'm just kidding. It sounds like just an 80s hardcore song. It sounds like an 80s hardcore song, exactly the tone I want to hear. I hear some like Poison Idea kind of vibe, some Void, Who Are You in there, and it's just like rips through it. I love it. And I was gonna skip to the next instrument almost right there, because both those songs kind of have another thing in it that I really enjoy. That chunky bass. But anyways, we'll stay with the guitar. I am not the one to be talking about how I feel about specific instruments. I'm just an enjoyer and not a connoisseur when it comes to the music. And I tried to write notes on it. I really did. It really did not succeed when it came to really just talking about specific instruments.
I think that Chris does a very good job of showing that he is just an incredible guitarist, even this early. I mean, I guess the band had almost been a band for a decade by the time they recorded this, but even at this point in the band's trajectory, you can tell that Chris is maybe a better guitarist than he's letting on. And a song like this really shows that, where, yeah, man, it sounds like Void. It sounds like, what was their DC band that they talk about all the time? Government Issue,
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It's definitely in that vein, but played so well and so tight. Some of that probably has to do with the idea that they went to the studio to record this album, got there and had like 3 or 4 songs, and then ended up flying home and rewriting the album and going back and having to re-record it. So I feel like when they went in, for the final version of it, I think they went in really, really ready. And I think that comes through in Chris's guitar parts on the song for sure.
I'm going to agree with you too, and because every song that I thought of, or band and song that I thought of while listening to this is just a way more solid, concise, polished version of that.
Mhm.
Whether it be like your Discharge, your TSOL, your Poison Ideas, Void, whatever, all the things we've said. It's just, yeah, Government Issue. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't even think of that yesterday. Good job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's there's different interviews that Greg or Keith or Steve have done with different members of the band where they talk about how there was a lot of Voivod, and that's the one that sort of gets brought up all the time when you're talking about Propagandy. But then also apparently there was a string of shows that Government Issue did. Who knows when this would have been, but the Government Issue records apparently played a huge role on them. And I think you can really hear that in the song, specifically in the guitar work on this song. Dan, I just said guitar work. That's embarrassing. Dan, how do you feel about the bass line in this song and the bass tone on Less Talk, More Rock in general?
I love it. It's just, it's great. It's one of the things I love, especially about like hardcore in that era that they seem to be influenced by on this one. Just like that driving, just chunky, like this. Just listen to this. You're listening to that more than the guitar for the most part.
Yeah,
especially in the intro, right? It's just really setting the tone, and getting ready to mosh. You know what I mean? Just get ready to go side to side.
With the bass tone on this album, if it's the one thing on the album, the songs are all definitely there. The vocals, I mean, Chris obviously practiced and became a far more powerful vocalist, I think. And John K. Stampson going on and doing Weaker Than stuff definitely honed in on their skills. But the way that the bass line is the bass tone, I should say, is the one thing that on this record and on this song especially, I find it hits so pingy. Is pingy a word?
Pingy is absolutely a word. I don't know if I would have gotten to pingy, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And it stands out on this song, but also that almost lends to, as we were talking about, the very 80s leaning hardcore song version of it. Because man, a lot of those songs just didn't sound good at all. This at least sounds good, if again, unbalanced. And maybe that fits with the rest of Less Talk, More Rock as well, is not just the song flow, but the production.
Wow, what, you just tied that up into a nice little package.
Yeah, I do what I can,
dude.
I do have a hard time believing, even though I know it to be true, that the guy who wrote everything for the Weaker Thans is playing bass on a song this fucking intense.
100%. It's almost even hard to, like, this song aside, this album, or the last two albums, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's weird to think about, but it happened, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. Do you remember Ben Folds 5? Do you remember Ben Folds?
That's the brick.
Yeah, Brick was like the hit. Yeah. He had a couple
and
hits.
Rock in the Suburbs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So Ben Folds, I think this was a sign of late 90s. I think he had 2 albums out and they recorded a live album. I think he might have been one of those guys that was better live. Anyway, sure. Ben Folds on his live album did a death metal song. And it was not a joke. Like it was only 40 seconds or something, but it was like his drummer played blast beats and Ben Folds had like a weird noodly piano thing. Anyway, that's how I remember it. I didn't listen to it again before saying that, but that's how this strikes me. It's just like, if you put this song on a Weaker Thans album, it would be like the Ben Folds death metal song.
Damn, I got to look that up now.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I was gonna say, do we pause this and come back? No, that's too much of a tangent. We'll save that for in the DMs.
We're doing our thing. We're doing a thing here. We got to do the thing at the at the part where the murderers walk our streets part, though. The bass sort of gets away from what's happening on guitar. Everything in the song until then, bass and guitar are sort of playing the same thing at the same time, and then it feels like it gets away. But honestly, a song this intense should kind of make you feel bewildered. You know, you shouldn't feel too comfortable when something is moving this fast. Otherwise, it gets boring. You know what I mean? So there is something that sort of pulls you back in, even though it feels like, again, off balance. Ooh, off balance. That's the theme of this episode.
Chaotic from the first note to the last.
Yeah. Just ripping through energy drinks, huh?
The second one is actually a non-alcoholic tropical sour from Quebec.
Yeah, you quit drinking a while ago.
Hell yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah. In the middle of doing the podcast about Good Riddance, which has, one very vocal straight edge member. It's almost
Oh,
like
not the podcast, the band. Okay, yeah. I was like, wait a minute. I was like,
no.
you're a bartender, and I was
Oh yeah, no,
a substance
definitely.
abuser.
Well, and you figured it out. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the drums.
Yeah.
To me, they aren't the most impressive work that Jordan's ever done with Propagandy, but they are blisteringly fast.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about when you and I had talked about which song we wanted to take off of Greg and Steve's plate for unscripted moments, there was, I don't know how many songs there are left. I'm sure Greg can update you on. There's probably 12 or 14 more Propagandy songs to go for them to get through, but you and I talked about this and decided on going with the most Good Riddance sounding song of Propagandy's career. Sticking to what we know of all the ones that were left over. And to me, the drums on this one are about as close to Sean Sellers drums as you're going to find in all of Propagandy's output. They're super quick all the way through. The fills that don't really distract from anything else that's going on. They keep you guessing just enough. It's not as though Jord tried to fit too much into the 34-second jam that we've got here.
I mean, you're right. Yeah, it is definitely the most Good Riddance sounding song without really being a Good Riddance sounding song at all.
Yeah.
And as much as I kind of agree with you about the drums, I also would never mistake the two. Right? It's just
definitely not.
Yeah. I think it was like 140 BPM. Like that's pretty damn fast.
They're ripping.
They're ripping.
Yeah. Is there anything about the drum tones on this one that gets you as well?
No, it's I know it's terrible podcasting. It's just such a short, concise little burst of energy that just punches you in the face, and there's nothing that really fully stands out other than the entire song as a whole.
Yeah, it is a 34-second long, like freeze frame punch in the jaw.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about vocals?
Sure. Do we do vocals and lyrics at the same time, or are we keeping them separate?
No, lyrics is later. Vocals is now.
Okay.
Look, these vocals are not the most impressive thing Chris has ever given us.
No.
They're kind of shouted in a sneer, and like he's moved away from that since, but they fit the song just fine. I like how well enunciated everything is so that even my 15-year-old self could appreciate how crass these lyrics are. And when I say crass, I mean crass, the adjective, but I also mean crass, the band.
Oh, look at you go. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about the lyrics in a bit, like we just said. The part that makes the song, the part that makes the song and Less Talk More Rock definitely 1990s Fat Record is the harmonies on Murderers Walk Our Streets. That part is really like the part that sticks out in the song, right? Like I said before, John K. Sampson's contributions to the band clearly didn't sound like what we would come to know him as. These contributions are still excellent. And in cases like this, they make the song stick out as opposed to just, the hardcore song on an otherwise kind of melodic punk rock album. Did you always, I feel like I know the answer to this one, but did you always like the short, fast song on these albums? When you think about like 90s Fat and Epitaph albums, Millencolin would have a song that's 22 seconds long, or, your favorite, The Descendants, Coffee Mug or Hobophobic off of Heavy Petting Zoo. Were you drawn to those ones, the short fasties?
Because of the novelty of it, yes.
Yeah.
Like there was so much, that was such like a prevalent thing for a while that even Fat did that comp, obviously, that we all remember.
Yeah.
The 101 songs, right? Short music for short people or whatever.
Like 7 of them are worth listening to.
Thank you. I don't know the exact number, but like when we were doing the pod, I remember listening to it with a friend of mine, and we just had a contest to like see who could name as many artists as they could from hearing it and whatnot. That's the only time I've listened to it since it came out, pretty much. And I don't go back to it very often. Like it's a novelty thing. And that's not to say that this song is a novelty song by any stretch.
That's what I was going to say, is this song is an outlier amongst all of those, because Homophobic, a song about Fat Mike being scared of bums, is entirely different than what we're dealing with in Rio De San Atlanta, Manitoba.
Yeah. And you brought up something that I never thought of. You said the enunciation, everything being pronounced and clear. I don't think I ever realized that. Obviously, that's by design. He's saying something very important, and there's the hook, which you also brought up. The murderers walk our streets. If you're just listening to it, not paying attention, and you hear that, you're gonna be like, whoa, 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 whoa. What did he just say? And you heard it, but you're gonna go back and listen to it. You're gonna hear it, and yeah, it's I think everything is very calculated in this song vocally.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
We are going to move on to lyrics, but before we get into lyrics, we're going to hear another cover. This one, in my ears, it takes on a very cool, like Gary Newman warm leatherette.
Oh, okay.
Like a maybe like a post Depeche Mode, pre Nine Inch Nails, vibey sort of. I picture goth kids listening to this version of it is what it comes down to.
Okay. All right.
And I think it's a very cool take on the song. I didn't look into who recorded this. Greg sent it to me and was like, make sure you keep this in the episode. I didn't look into it because honestly, this cover is so spooky. I kind of want it to remain a mystery for me.
Hell yeah. Let's go.
Maybe Greg will put it in the show notes or something.
Cities seem to function quite the same. Sweeping ghettos under one big rug makes them easier to contain. So the upper middle class can sleep, convince themselves that trickle down will solve this poverty. Murderers walk our streets. Their weapons are their pens test policies and PR campaigns fed by the spoils of war against the lazy, shiftless populations of the poor. This system could not be reformed.
So that's our chill wave, synth wave, 1984. I imagine a long leather jacket unironically being worn as that song is sung, and I love it.
A duster, perhaps.
Yeah, a duster, but like a classy, like proto Matrix duster.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. All right. Shall we get into lyrics?
Before that, well, and a little peek behind the curtain. We took a little break while we listened to that too, and I listened to the song again. And I totally get what you're saying about the pinginess, but there's got to be a better name for it. But I get what you're saying. Just imagine if we knew what we were talking about when it came to those instruments.
Imagine.
Okay, sorry. Before we get into it. Earlier, you had asked me a question, and I totally steamrolled over it while I was just chugging an energy drink. You asked if I ever saw Propaganda live.
Yeah.
And I totally did not respond to you.
No, you didn't.
No, I did not. And it clicked in. But yes, many times in many different places, I've been lucky enough to catch them. And especially when I was younger, getting the opportunity to see them and being introduced to the thoughts of like Noam Chomsky and anything through the AK Press literature, like, and just meeting other like-minded punks. Like, it was truly great experiences. And yeah, there was a lot of dude bros that weren't really listening to the music or the lyrics, sorry, and just listening to that fast aggressive music. But again, that's not very dissimilar to the last band that we covered for many episodes.
Many episodes.
Many episodes. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you saw them? Like what tour it was?
I don't necessarily remember exactly what tour it was. I remember it was at Barrymore's in Ottawa. I remember there was someone from out of town who was at a lot of hardcore shows who was just sitting on the stage, yelling head, chest, foot at them the entire time.
Sounds exciting.
These are things that I remember. And the last time that they played Ottawa before that I went was the infamous time where they allegedly came out and played the entire set naked. But I don't. Yeah.
That was that Less Talk Southern Ontario tour. I've heard lots of stories about that. I never heard the one where they played naked in Ottawa, but it doesn't surprise me based on other things that were going on with the band at that time.
Could not do that now, but at the time it was shocking.
I mean, you could.
Well, I mean, sure, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah. All right, Dan, thank you for remembering and circling back to your live experiences of Propaganda.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
No, we're good. Shall we get into the lyrics? Okay, so Dan, there are 9 lines in this song.
Yeah.
Let's see how long we can talk about them. Our cities seem to function quite the same. Sweeping ghettos under one big rug makes them easy to contain. Dan, how do you feel about that?
I mean, like, how do I feel? It's one of those like obvious statements, or maybe it's obvious for us now that I think of it, now that I say it out loud. But I mean, it's, every major city or every city is just running the same way, whether it's like your Rio de Janeiro, your San Francisco, your Atlanta, your Winnipegs. This is what I'm assuming the song is named after, right? It's just could be anywhere in America, or the Americas, I guess. Yeah, just segregating the poor and disenfranchised to the inner cities and creating soul-sucking suburbs.
Yep. For me,
is that editorializing?
that sounds about right. For me, this line is about the idea that, sort of what you were saying, for a large percentage of city dwellers, everything works just fine. As long as these citizens stick to their routines, the same route they commute every day, or the same parks that they go to, they can be forgiven for thinking that everything is fine. But just because you can't see what's wrong with any city doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with the city, or that there's nothing there, or that everyone in your immediate surroundings, like, people are not being treated as equal just because of geography. As for sweeping ghettos under one big rug, when we first came up with the idea to take over this episode from Greg, it's taken us a while to get to it. Anyway, it was topical when we first started working on this episode. And by now, however many other atrocities have replaced it in the headlines. But Jordan Neely was the name of a 30-year-old man that was murdered on a subway in New York City because he was unhoused. He was yelling and screaming about how starving he was. And while people are saying that he was being aggressive and annoying and whatever, there's no excuse for some ex-Marine on that subway to have put Jordan in a chokehold until he died, which is what happened. But the reason I bring this up is because that train that he was on runs directly from the lower end of Manhattan, the Lower East Side-ish of Manhattan, to a more recently gentrified area of Brooklyn. And what is gentrification, if not the displacing of less fortunate people into smaller areas with fewer resources available? I have another one.
Yeah.
I lived in Vancouver. Yeah, I lived in Vancouver in 2004 and 2005, and then I went back in 2010, and I went and I worked the Olympics. I worked at a hotel during the Olympics, and the area around Maine and Hastings was pretty rough when I was living there in 2004, 2005. But then in 2010, with the world watching, the area had been condensed. Like, the roughest area was condensed, and now the area, 3 blocks in any direction from Maine and Hastings, Chinatown, Gastown, that sort of area, that once housed all the marginalized communities, has become almost an entertainment district. And instead, they've really just stacked everybody less fortunate into a smaller area. For such an on-the-nose set of lyrics, it's pretty telling that, 8 or 10 years after this song was written, 15 years after this song was written, being able to witness it with my own eyes rather than it being an ethereal concept, even though it's an on-the-nose description, watching it actually happen is pretty impactful. I have no idea how they dealt that, but the city looked great during the Olympics, and things like this happen in cities all over North America, all over the Americas, like you were saying, the whole world. And while I can't make there's no way that it's worth it. Olympics. The Olympics look great to the general population and feel good, I guess, for the general population's emotions. But I can't imagine ever justifying it. And at this point, gentrification in general is almost entirely focused on revenue for people and, companies that already have enough going on financially. And as those people get more and more money through redevelopment areas and, making entertainment districts out of low income areas, it leads to the next line of the song.
Yeah, and just to add on to what you were saying too, we're seeing it on a much smaller scale, even in our little neighborhood in Toronto.
Yeah, certainly.
Like it's just even recently with that, not to not to dox myself, but that on my street, that armed robbery that happened last week.
Yeah.
And then all the comments are just, I don't know. Anyway, it's just talking about getting all the unhoused people and the people who have mental health issues out of the area. And it's like, no, we were here first.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not unhoused, mind you, but I mean, anyways,
But like that's treating a symptom and not the cause.
Yes.
Yeah. So the upper middle class can sleep and convince themselves that trickle down will solve this poverty. So clearly this is not how things work. And I'm not an economist, and I'm not even very good at math, as evidenced earlier on in this episode. But at no point has anyone ever explained trickle down economics to me in a way that makes even a little bit of sense.
On the most basic level, I can understand how someone might think it makes sense.
Okay.
But it doesn't make sense. But I mean, so it just in the way that so if these rich people, get richer, they will invest into business. Business creates jobs. Trickle, trickle, trickle.
In theory, yeah. Except for the jobs that they're creating don't actually provide enough of a living for anyone who's working those jobs, but they do exponentially grow those business owners' profits.
Well, yes. And not only that, but the increased wealth is not creating jobs. If anything, they're trying to eliminate jobs by automating things, by, not to talk about our future robot overlords or anything like that. But I mean, just look at the WGA.
It's cute you think that's in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, future is, the next few weeks or whatever. Yeah. But I digress. Sorry. I'll go into a big rant about the entertainment industry anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you don't need to apologize for anything. All right. Murderers walk our streets. Their weapons are their pens /desks /policies. In 1996, when this album came out, I'd started sort of moving away from Fat and Epitaph stuff. I was definitely, starting to dig deep on more classic punk stuff or extremely DIY hardcore bands. Maybe bands, sometimes with charged hair, or sometimes bands that would only buy things from thrift stores, or sometimes bands that would only wear other bands' t-shirts, whatever, And Crass, I mentioned Crass earlier. I got very, very into Crass, specifically the albums Penis Envy and The Feeding of the 5,000, because Crass was very good at taking big, wide, huge, zoomed out ideas and condensing them into sentences that are just amazing. And anyone that's been listening to Unscripted Moments since it started, which I have, what's his name? Brandon from Lawrence Arms. Bad Sandwich Brandon was on this podcast a long time ago talking about rock for sustainable capitalism. And he said, I'm going to paraphrase here. He said on that episode that just because we were young, it don't mean we were wrong. He was like, that line is so good, it's better than Minor Threat. Minor Threat wrote lyrics that good, And I would say my 15-year-old self thought that the line, murderers walk our streets, their weapons are their pens, desk policies, are at least as good as anything Crass ever wrote. As a 42-year-old, I see that it's a wild oversimplification, but goddamn, it's so good. It's so good.
You've said everything and more that it is a grand oversimplification. However, not wrong. Not wrong at all.
Yeah. Did this line strike you in any particular way?
No, it hit on some of the same marks. That's so all the points that it hit me on, hit you on, and then you encompassed way more, which covered it. And yeah, I don't know. I grew up in Ottawa. I grew up in a government town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like it's. I guess maybe I did feel some type of way hearing that, being like, oh, all these policymakers and everything are just walking down Bank and Spark Street like nothing's wrong, but the world is cold and without hope.
Yeah. And that was in 1996.
And that was in 1996.
Yeah. I sort of split the last sentences up here, the last few lines up. So PR campaigns fed by the spoils of war. All right. So following the money is the easiest way to feel good about nothing.
Yeah, I love The Wire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even when you're supporting independent grocery stores or restaurants or clothing shops, the grains or materials came from somewhere, some farm. And maybe there's a contract on who delivers those things. And those contracts involve businesses that are owned by people that also own shares in weapons manufacturers and donate huge amounts of money to lobbying politicians to keep war going on forever and ever. And, you know, the more war goes on, the more money they make. But I think that specifically in this case, and I say this because of the track following this one on Less Talk, More Rock, this line is probably a direct stab at Shell, who in the 90s and like definitely earlier, but in the 90s is when we found out about it, used government forces to clear the way militarily and bureaucratically so that they could drill for oil in desolate or, you know, developing nations with almost no benefit to the population of those countries or areas of the world that they were benefiting from drilling in.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head, because what is the next track on the album about?
Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
It's a PR campaign that was fed by the spoils of war. Again, very on the nose, this song, really stretching out, trying to get some conversation about lyrics in here. It's not easy.
Yeah, there's the it's not very deep, you know. It's just yeah, like you said, it's nine lines of lyrics.
9 lines of lyrics. Super easy. Okay, Dan. Again, next line. Against the lazy, shiftless populations of the poor. Dan, you go first on this one.
It's really tough to like get really deep into it because it is so straightforward. You know, it's just really the same thing that we're seeing now, what, 27 years later? Is that right? Is that math right? Yeah, that math checks out.
I don't know.
It's just kind of and it's just kind of like the same dumb bullshit of, you know, can't find people to work. You know, not that it's necessarily, you know, nobody wants to work anymore or whatever it is, and kind of just putting the blame on lazy poor people, like, oh, you can't afford this, work harder. And by this I mean life. There was recently in Montreal, there was an article discussing the cost of living, and someone who was interviewed for the article, whose name escapes me at the moment, it's just coming to me right now, mentioned, and it was someone of prominence, if I'm not mistaken, maybe not prominence, but importance, pseudo importance, whatever, saying that cities are built for the entitled, the privileged. That's what it was, the entitled and the privileged. And if you can't afford to live in a city, you should move out of a city. Which is factually incorrect. That's not what cities were made for.
No, it's almost the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but it's just that same whole thing of just kind of putting the blame onto the less fortunate, to say that they're the reason why everything is happening that is not okay.
Yeah. You know what, Dan?
I just talk into a circle. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. That's exactly right. I mean, cities, so far as I know, historically, cities were created because it was a center for trade. When you've got farmers spread out over a huge swath of land, you make an area where everyone can meet and exchange goods and services with each other and for each other. And it actually builds community, not wealth. Anyway, yeah, that's okay. I'm going to have to look into this article now. Anyway, so in the last decade and in the last 3 years, especially, I've decided not really to blame people, like individuals, for a lot of their wrongdoings. most of the actions that people take, or like whether it's consciously or unconsciously, they're conditioned into us. We are conditioned, and we rarely get the chance in our lives to re-examine long-held thoughts and beliefs. So you know what? If you make a mistake, I'll probably forgive you. Probably. There's exceptions, obviously,
Sure.
but
Of
like
course.
in general, we're conditioned to make mistakes. I just read a book called The Myth of Normal. What's his name? Gabor Mate, I believe, is the author. If you want to go deep on that idea, read that book. It will take you forever. It's like 700 pages. But to be forced into making seemingly harmful decisions over and over again based on circumstances that you can't control should not earn someone the label of lazy or shiftless. And the markers that the character speaking these words in this song is using for what wouldn't be lazy or shiftless. Like what do you have to do to not qualify for either of those two things? Scapegoating, like you were saying, scapegoating marginalized communities is a tactic that's been used forever by rulers to keep non-rulers at each other's throats and fighting for crumbs or whatever metaphor gets overused but somehow unheard. And I feel like this is a different way of putting that idea out there. Last line in the song, and I love it because this is where Chris's voice kind of breaks too, where he shouts, "The system cannot be reformed."
Yeah.
Do you know about the master's tools? This is something that I feel in the last 3 years especially has been showed up everywhere, where the master's tools will not disassemble what has been built. I'm paraphrasing and getting it wrong, but the thing is, you're not gonna fix a system while working within a system.
Right. Basically, it's I get it. It's one of those people being like, I'm gonna fix it from the inside, and it's like you might as well just be wearing a fucking clown makeup while you're saying it, right? So
yeah.
But this this line, it's the perfect ending line, right? Because the system can't be reformed and the system can't be fixed because it's not broken. It's operating exactly as it was designed to, and that's like capitalism and cops and systematic racism. But I mean, that's all one and the same, really. But it's the final line is perfect, and like you said, the voice kind of breaks because of I think of the desperation and the urgency of letting people know that it can't be reformed. Like there's no way to continue in this late stage capitalism and expect things to work out. It's time for something new, comrades. Let's go.
Yeah,
capitalism sucks. Time to become radical communists. Let's
we
go.
Yeah, it's a grim ending to a brutal song. And speaking of brutal, if you go on whatever streaming platform you use and you look up Rio De San Atlanta, Manitoba, you will find a cover. Maybe Greg will plug it into the show. I don't know. Greg doesn't actually get a day off for us doing this. He has to deal with it anyway. But there's a cover by a band called Nazem, and Nazem recorded this song. I feel like it was recorded like 2 years after this record came out. It was shortly afterwards. And the Nazem version of it is just brutal, crushing. Nazem definitely fits into that peace punk grinding sort of in that vein. Definitely not Fat Records, which leads me to say that this band, and I'm fortunate. I've been on this podcast a couple times. Dan, welcome. I'm welcoming you.
Hey.
I've as a weird guest host. But it leads me to say that this band, Propaganda, and all their attempts to bum out everybody in every scene at various times during their career, different people they take it to task, different organizations that they have not at all championed. They've still managed to unite skateboarding pop punk nerds and skateboarding grindcore nerds. Speaking of, how do you feel about Propaganda in 2023? Like, where do they sit for you?
So at the end of the day, 27 years after this record comes out, Propaganda is still a band that I love and follow and admire. And like I mentioned earlier, as my musical tastes have evolved, so did their sound. They still crush live. Truly an important and transformative band in my past, my present, and likely in my future, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not to suck it up because I now am embarrassed I said that in case they listen to it, but hey, whatever.
No, it's great. And this is something, most controversial part of every episode of Unscripted Moments.
Sure.
At the end of the show, Greg and Keith however many moons ago, and Greg and Steve now, when they do the show, they rate the song. And Dan,
Okay.
I'm going to pretend like I've done this a billion times before. I'm going to give you the
Sure.
lowdown. When
Let's
you're rating this song, you're not rating Rio De San Atlanta, Manitoba against all of music. You're thinking in the realm of propagandy, of all the propagandy songs that you've ever heard, out of 5, and you are allowed 1 decimal point. Although I feel like these guys just make up decimal points sometimes, but
Sure.
out of 5 against all other propagandy songs. So like your absolute favorite, unfuckwithable favorite propagandy song is a 5, and Ska Sucks is a 1. I'm assuming.
What if they're one and the same?
Well, I don't. I think,
No, they're not.
then we're never invited back on the podcast. Where would you put Rio De San Atlanta, Manitoba on your propagandy rating scale out of 5?
Oh, this is a very good question. Like, compared to other propagandy songs, it's not my favorite by any stretch.
Nope.
I don't dislike it at all, but it's not going to make my top 10 or top 20. It's a song that I think is on a near perfect record that I really never think of. It's like I said, it's following a former favorite song, and it's followed by the only track on this record that I'll skip because I'll just want to get to the nation states that much quicker. And it's not a dig towards the
of course.
It's just like I don't need it right now. So what would I rate this? Shit, this is hard.
It's important to know
2 7/8. No, that's too low. 3 9/16.
3 9/16. Excellent. So definitely not 3.5.
No, but it's great.
Just,
but it's
just
not,
better
it's not
than
in my
3.5.
tops.
Like
it's not
3,
in my tops.
like 3.53 or whatever that is. I don't know, man.
Yeah,
We've already discussed too much math. I'm gonna say this song is like a 2.3 for me.
Oh shit, we were almost right on. I saw the look on your face, and that's why I upped my rating, because I was like, oh no, that was too low.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going a little lower. As propagandy matured beyond this, they've done songs that are just as fast and as impactful, but maybe fit the record better, fit a vibe better, and don't sound as raw, I guess.
Yeah.
Well,
I go back to my original score, 2 7/8. It sounded better anyways.
Sure, 2 7/8. That's great. All right. Again, thanks so much to Greg and Steve and Keith for all the work they have put into Unscripted Moments over the last 4 years or whatever it's been. If you want to reach out to Dan, how do they do that?
Don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, come on.
You know what? You could email us, lastbelieverpod@gmail.com. We might check it one day. Hit us up on that Instagram. I don't know. That's probably the best way to do it, right?
Yeah. Last Believer Pod.
I guess so.
I think one of the two of us checks it almost once a week.
What, the email?
No, the email. Don't send us an email. Just send DMs.
No. I'm not gonna lie. I checked it today for the first time in a few months. It's scary in there. I gotta.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you for taking the time and coming and co-hosting this with me. I also want to give a shout out to Matt Wu, who is was a regular on Last Believer, mostly for the songs that involved more musicianship talk. We would invite Matt Wu as a musician. We invited him to come and be a part of this too, but Matt Wu is a busy man with a young child who has a full-time job and a wife and a real life going on. So he didn't have an hour to come and sit and hang out and chat about propagandy tonight. And we are not judging him for that. We love him. Please check out Matt's bands, Mistake Not and Tragic Hearts. Tragic Hearts put out a record earlier this year. Mistake Not is forever working on a record. Real Chinese democracy vibes. They were formerly, most of Mistake Not was formerly in the Victim Party as well. If you want to check out that band, they are definitely worth your listen. My 100%. Name is Josh Lindley. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll go back to Greg and Steve next week.
One last slide this in here. I recently told someone that it's a hot take that Chicks Dig It was the best Canadian punk band not named Propagandy, and it really upset that person, and I just want to say I stand by that statement, and don't at me.
Walk our streets. The weapons of their princess policies. dark and beasted by the